My background is actually a little bit atypical for most people that you'd meet in the crypto or Web3 space. I have a PhD in neuroscience. I really was interested in looking at digital identity from the perspective of patient medical records. How do we just make data sharing easier? We built really some of the very first functional implementations of what science running on Web3 architecture could look like.
When you compare it with the traditional system, KYC models?
Most existing models all do the same thing. They're all using the same data providers, actually. And because of data regulation requirements, they typically have to keep this data on hand. On one side, they don't want to get in trouble with the government. And then on the other side, they have a giant honeypot that has a lot of valuable data in it. Somebody's coming for you on one side or the other. It's either the government or some bad actor who's going to find a way into your system. The best thing you can do really is...
Hello everyone. Today with us is Mr. Shady El Damaty from Holonym, a digital identity focused firm protocol. And I'm Prashant Jhai, a CCN reporter, and we'll be discussing the evolution of digital identity, privacy, and how things work in the digital identification world. So to begin with, Mr. Shady, how do you see this world evolving over the time? How did you get into the digital identity thing? What kind of motivated you to get into it, or what kind of problems you faced that made you to focus on something like digital identity and privacy?
Yeah, happy to chime in. Thanks for having me on. My background is actually a little bit atypical for most people that you'd meet in the crypto or Web3 space. I have a PhD in neuroscience, and I was
Neuroscience,
really
yeah.
interested. Yeah, and I really was interested in looking at digital identity from the perspective of patient medical records, and specifically, like, how do we build better data sets for scientific analyses across different data consortia, and how do we just make data sharing easier? And so to really solve that problem, you need to kind of solve some privacy considerations, and identity is at the heart of that. So yeah, so I built a bunch of apps, kind of like really pioneering decentralized science, or DeSci, back in 2020 and 2021. We built really some of the very first functional implementations of what science running on Web3 architecture could look like. And this was before like the IP NFT craze. This was before a lot of the biotech stuff that's become more mainstream now within the Web3 space. And yeah, and so we were innovating really early, and we moved really fast. So we went from thinking about identity specifically for science to more generally. And we received a couple different awards, hackathon awards, and grant funding from primarily from Protocol Labs, which helped us really narrow in on zero knowledge proofs. And this was in 2021, when developer tooling for ZKP was was just beginning to mature. It was a lot more accessible to actually build a consumer app with ZKP. That wasn't really possible like even 6 months or a year before that. And so we just like really focus on bringing these things to life, like, being able to create identities that are private, that are portable, that you own, that are tied to a key that only you access. And we immediately saw some traction within the civic tech space, civic technology. So, a couple of folks heard about what we were doing, and our first client was Andrew Yang. Andrew Yang was ex-presidential candidate for the United States Democratic Party. Yep. And so he launched a DAO to raise crypto funds for political campaigns. And similar to Constitution DAO. It's called Lobby 3 for anti-poverty. And but the problem was that if they were going to actually use this for campaign financing, they needed to KYC all of the DAO members. But they didn't do that. And so we stepped in and helped them out by doing something a little bit after the fact, by having users do ZK KYC and proving that an address was a US resident, so that the treasury funds that they voted on could actually be used. So, the rest is pretty much history after that. We built a year after that, we scaled to our first $1 million in revenue. And then to date, we have over 2.3 million users that have used the identity protocol. And now we're kind of like opening up a completely new chapter where we're not just building identity tooling now, but going a little bit more beyond that, thinking about what does true self-custody look like? Because identity at its heart is really you're solving like a key infrastructure challenge. So it becomes, at some point after you're building identity tooling, you end up actually building like wallet tooling, which is where we're more gravitating towards these days.
So when we talk about identity and in the Web3 space, what are the practical scenarios are you thinking of where current identity systems exclude people? Like when you compare it with the traditional system KYC models, how do you differentiate within the traditional models?
Yeah, I mean, most existing models of KYC all do the same thing. It's you verify whether a government ID is valid. It's not like they're all using the same data providers, actually. There's like, I think, like 3 or 4 data aggregators that let you actually interact with government databases. And so all these companies are all just competing, excuse me, for access to the same thing. And because of data regulation requirements, they typically have to keep this data on hand for either their clients or for liability that they inherit on behalf of their clients. So, you know, identity verifications are a little bit different in this because they have different risk tolerance. But Verif, for example, doesn't say how long they'll disclose the data for. They'll say, okay, fine, like, you can delete data in your sandbox for, after some period of time, but they don't really say how long they keep that data on their own. And that's because I think
Right.
they want to cover their butt legally. Now, the downside of that is they're kind of waiting for it. They're stuck. It's a shitty situation. Like, on one side, they don't want to get in trouble with the government. And then on the other side, they have a giant honeypot that has a lot of valuable data in it. So at one point or the other, like, you kind of have to be crazy to run a business like this because somebody's coming for you on one side or the other. It's either, the government or some bad actor who's going to find a way into your system. And it happens all the time. It happens to the best, right? Even Coinbase
Yeah.
has suffered a massive data breach. To governments, companies, private. So the only way really you can like beat this, or just don't put yourself in that situation. Don't even make yourself vulnerable in this way. The best thing you can do really is to design your architecture so that you don't need to custody that data. So that's what we do. Wherever we can, we have a client custody of data. So whenever you do some sort of verification, you do the verification, the computation occurs on the device, and you just share a proof that the computation ran correctly. And so that becomes your identity proof, basically. Now, when it comes to compliance and like banking and like kind of more like places where the government actually needs to query, right? So how do we avoid the situation where if the government comes calling that we have the data available? So we think about things a little bit differently. We think of it as, your pseudonymity is conditional, right? And in 99.99% of cases, your pseudonymity is guaranteed. I don't know when's the last time the government's asked for your KYC documents.
Right.
Legally asked for your KYC documents, like actually went through the process and submitted a court order and said, I want this person. So this is something we've been building out for Aztec. Aztec is a privacy L2 that's built from the ground up with ZK primitives. And they have this problem where, okay, all the transactions on their chain are completely anonymous, but like what happens if North Korea is using the chain? Like how does, and the government gets wind of this and they say, hey, I need to know the identity of these people. This is a national security issue. How do they navigate that? So we built a technology for them called Proof of Clean Hands. Proof of Clean Hands basically lets you prove that your hands are clean, that you're not on a sanctions list. And it does so with ZK. So you do KYC and ZK. And then as part of the process, you have the use terms of the bridge or the use terms of the application that says, I consent to using this application and I understand that my identity is private, and all my transactions are private unless I appear on a sanctions list or exceed some risk threshold. For example, like I do some sort of transaction that's flagged, and then in that case, then the government has to show a valid court order to actually query this. They have to know exactly which address they're querying, and then basically they can present that to the protocol, and then the protocol will assess these conditions and then do the decryption, which is enforced
Yes.
on chain. Um, so that's kind of how we're thinking about it. Like, it's a completely different architecture than what's been built up already.
Like,
And yeah, we're still proving it out. It's live right now with Aztec on the test net, and we've
Uh,
used it for the Ika airdrop. Yeah.
nice. Yeah, I mean, looking forward to that. And now talking about the technical aspect of it, like how would you explain the zero knowledge proofs working on the backside to the like a common user who is not aware of the technology or
Oh, I mean, we don't explain it to them at all. Actually, they say, "Hey, just continue business as usual. There's nothing to see here. Literally, nothing to see here. Just understand that this is a privacy enhanced technology."
and it just works on the background and the end user doesn't really need to bother about it.
Yeah, they might need to wait a little bit longer for the computation to occur on the device, but not much
Mm.
longer. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
So, what kind of identity breaches leaks are most dangerous today, from like financial point of view or biometric or reputational? How do you see the kind of risk factor associated with that?
It's absolutely biometrics. I think any sort of leak of iris data, fingerprint data, like face matched with like other likeness, like cross-modal biometrics, I think is really, really dangerous. The number one that everyone's going to say is like deep fakes. I think like that's all in people's minds. If somebody, a bad actor, really wanted to ruin your life, they could assemble whatever information they have on you to try to, take over your bank accounts, deep fake the bank and call them and tell them, hey, it's me and I have all this information. So that's like on the threat actor level, like where it's like, some guy from, I don't know, Russia or who knows where, from the US, even maybe some bad, hacker who's just trying to make money. Um, but on the flip side, I mean, the worst side is actually state actors, right? So actual governments that now know everything about you. They know this person walked down the street at this time and went to this store and spent $5 at this store and then spent, 2 seconds looking at the state approved advertisement instead of 3 seconds, right? And I mean, it's kind of like a little bit fear mongery, but I do think like governments are interested in being able to predict the population. And so biometric tech gives a lot of power to centralized authorities. And you have to have a lot of trust in your government to make sure that's not abused. Yeah.
True. I mean, let's just say that a hacker got access to my biometrics and digital identity. How does a firm like Holonym comes into the picture, and how would they prevent a situation like that?
Yeah. I mean, it's by design, right? So if a hacker was trying to get your information, if they're using like something that used Holonym, if they're trying to hack something that used Holonym, there's nothing there for them to hack, right? They would have to break post quantum encryption to do so. Not saying it's not impossible, but if they have enough time in the universe, maybe they can break it. But it's going to be completely impractical for them to do that. It's not, I don't think they can live long enough for that. But for for people that already are victims of hacks, I think like the best thing that they can do is there's a bunch of paid services on the internet that can scrub your data. I would
Mm.
start from there and then recreate a privacy first presence online using technology like Holonym and others.
So let's say as a user, non-expert one, what are the top three things I should immediately be doing to secure my digital identity?
Yeah, I think number one, do a scan of the dark web. So use tools like Have I Been Pwned or other. There's a bunch of stuff you can find a whole list of them, and do a for like basically clean house, right? Like make sure that you know what your exposure is out there, and go through and just clean up and make sure that I think also just like wherever you can using privacy enhancing like browsing tech, like if you don't need to
DuckDuckGo.
like yeah, like for example, on my phone, I have a Google Pixel, and I also have an iPhone. So the iPhone, like I use for like family stuff, but like all business goes through the Pixel because with the Pixel I can control like everything. I can install a special operating system on there, and I can prevent trackers. I can prevent like basically companies creating profiles on me using this. And so this just makes me feel safer, right? Like it makes me feel less of a target and a much smaller data point that can be monitored and controlled. So I think like these kind of like little lifestyle hacks. And then the third is especially if you're a crypto user, your entire on-chain history is like a fingerprint. It's like one of the
Yeah.
scariest things about using crypto, honestly. It's whatever you do with crypto, it's going to be there forever. Um, Unless you're using like Aztec or something, more privacy enhancing tech. So yeah, so I would suggest like on crypto, make sure that you're careful what you do on chain, that you use privacy tech whenever you can. And if not, make sure you're constantly rotating your keys and rotating your identities to kind of minimize your attack surface.
Yeah. I mean, thanks for those tips. I mean, talking about the weak links now, like what are some weak links in the ecosystem that we as users often can't control, but should at least be aware of?
Yeah, I think like the biggest one that people have been talking about, like engineers have been talking about a lot, that's not really mainstream for a while, but still seems to be a problem, is the RPC endpoints. So like, before you really can send your data to the blockchain, you need to assemble them and process them and like sort through the logic. And as part of that, a lot of data is made available to whoever is running that endpoint, whoever's running that service or that server, like whether it's Alchemy or Morales or like a custom one that you provide. That RPC provider can see all the associations between everyone. It makes them a great indexer for everyone, right? Like these are the people that have their finger on the pulse. They know everything. Now, Consensus has talked about in the past of like releasing something called DRPC, a decentralized RPC, where there's lower trust assumptions in this like really important part of the blockchain infrastructure stack. But we still haven't seen it, right? Like, we're still waiting for somebody to do something about this, but it's like not exactly easy.
So, like for someone who is still skeptical of Web3 decentralized identity systems because of the recurring scams or complexities involved in that, what will be your suggestions to them? Like, how do you try to win off their worries about the Web3 systems?
Yeah, what I would tell them is that the government already uses cryptography. If you have a passport, your passport has Web3 technology in it or cryptography in it. The passport has cryptographically signed attestation from the government that lets that credential actually be used to allow you to cross borders. Web3 basically is a layer on top of that takes that cryptography and distributes that power amongst a wider set of infrastructure providers. So, you know, there's ways we can use cryptography every day to enhance trust, to enhance the safety and security of these systems without ever needing to, say, like run a blockchain or exchange a cryptocurrency or anything like that. Uh, this tech specifically is intended to enhance individual sovereignty and power through encryption and privacy. That's really the core of it.
So, where are we standing at this point on the decentralized identity systems? What would be your like future in 5 years? Where do you see the system evolving into compared to today?
Yeah. That's a great question. So I'm really starting to see a merger between kind of like the hardcore cypherpunks, like the, anonymity by default, super secure, nobody knows who you are, not even, your friends, versus the kind of like more practical privacy where you're private, but if you break the law, there's consequences that need to be held up. So, it like punts this problem back to society and says, hey, like we need to make sure we have good democracy or good systems of governance that, whether it's democracy or not, that we can trust that these laws are actually in the best interest of the people. Um, but like in a day-to-day practice, we'll see things like where transactions are probably going to be uh, by default private. Identity will be by default private. There'll be no centralized honeypots where people can just hack. Like they'll have to go after the individual or find some sort of fingerprinting way to identify individuals. So yeah, I do think like we'll see like the continued tokenization of assets, like digital assets will continue to take off, tokenization of stocks, and that's all going to require digital identity that has like really strong security guarantees and assurances baked into it. Um, so yeah, so like I think in like 5 years, we're probably going to see a greater acceptance of zero knowledge proofs,
Hmm.
probably because of like their post quantum properties that will make them very attractive for countries that see it as a national security priority. I think some of the data breaches, like with India's Aadhaar system,
Hmm.
there was like also rumors of like the Pakistani data breach,
Yeah.
and across the world that'll really like have if you're setting up if you're a government setting up a digital identity system, like you're thinking about security. So I think like the Web3
True.
and crypto tech really has an advantage there.
So yeah, I mean, towards my final question, talking about the acceptance of the ID systems, like we see many Web3 use cases being integrated into traditional financial systems. Where do you see these digital identity solutions getting onto the traditional side of it? Like, do you see governments, as you mentioned, will prioritize it in later stages, but maybe not right now? So, where do you see the use cases of Web3 based solutions, zero knowledge proofs based identity systems coming into the real world?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. I think there's an opportunity right now with like the digitization of mobile driver's licenses, like within, say like Apple, for example, making these credentials more digital. I think there's a big opportunity for app developers to basically just integrate privacy preserving tech whenever they can when they're using these credentials. I think governments definitely want to do the right thing. They just don't know what the right thing is yet. So education is really important and continuing to be an advocate for privacy tech and demonstrate like what the possibilities and what the potential is there. Uh, Probably the most innovation will come from the financial markets, where financial markets want to go on chain, but without privacy, then they've been kind of hesitant to do so. So the emergence of like Miden and Aztec and some of these other privacy L2s is really gonna, I think, uh, push institutions to adopt privacy technology, privacy identity for private KYC, for money laundering, to remain in compliance. And I think this will have ripple effects across the industry.
That's, yeah, I mean, good to see the future picture. For the final one, I would like to ask you to like give us like top three or top five privacy focused tools which are doing a great job right now and have the potential to grow into something much bigger in like later years.
Yeah, absolutely. I've mentioned a couple
Yeah,
already.
you mentioned two. Right.
So Aztec and Miden are both L2s. Aztec is on testnet. I think Miden is closely behind. These will allow you to have like fully encrypted state for blockchain transactions, which is super exciting. I'm also really excited about DeFi tech like Railgun, which allows you to send and swap with shielded addresses. So creating these pseudonym identifiers that could be thrown away to prevent data association. In terms of other privacy tech, I think like ZK is really interesting. It's a project on Suite that allows you to. It's like a little bit more deeper in the infrastructure weeds, but allows you to create these zero knowledge policies on chain. So, if you want to have a blockchain, so you have a public blockchain and you want to have some logic about a user's account, like if they're on a sanctions check, do this, or if they, uh, you know, are trying to transact over $1,000, have them do 2FA. You can do that all in ZK, and that provides like much stronger security and at the same time offering transparency. So yeah, those would be the top three that come to mind.
Yeah, good to know that. And thank you so much for like giving us that insightful uh, knowledge into the ID systems and Web3 decentralized systems. How do they work? And hopefully, with like more progress in the field, we'll be talking further more often. And till then, see you next time. And thank you for taking out the time.
Thank you, Prashant.